What is going on, everybody? You are now listening to another episode of Casa Es Su Casa, and I am your host, Niko House, and we are on American Freedom Radio. As always, I want you all to go follow American Freedom Radio to hear more truth tellers. Just do the best they can at revealing society's realities, whether it be uncomfortable realities or realities that we just need to hear, and they also give reassurance to those who feel like they may be considered a little bit crazy because nobody else is paying attention. But American Freedom Radio has not obviously only myself, but others as well who do a great job of bringing their own unique truth to political dialogue. So make sure that you go check out American Freedom Radio. Follow them on Twitter, on Facebook. Check out their website as well. Also want to give a special shout out to our sponsors, the Credit Surgeons. If you're looking to have your credit repaired as soon as humanly possible, while also having your identity protected, or if you've been a victim of fraud, you can also use them to chase that perpetrator down and get some justice as well, all for a very, very, very low price. You can go to the Credit Surgeons, thecreditsurgeons.com, and schedule an appointment today to have that squared away. I do want to go ahead and get started. We have a few different topics today. I was trying to figure out which one I wanted to start with, but I do want to start with the school shooting that has recently taken place, because there's a lot of dialogue surrounding that subject, and as usual, we're kind of back in that same spot, right? Thoughts and prayers, prayers and thoughts. It's your fault, Republicans. It's your fault, Democrats. It's your fault, mental health industry. It's everybody's fault, right? Hell, I mean, we really should be just trying to figure out why the FBI had this guy pegged and did not do anything. By the way, that's which I'm gonna get into in a little bit. So I want to point out something, people. I want people to realize whenever they're being played, and I feel like this is one of those scenarios where we are being played. Make no mistake, the realities of a school shooting should absolutely wake us up. But I think that we all want the same solution, right? I don't think anyone disagrees with that. I think that if we're going to continue down this path, then things will get a lot worse before they get better. But right now, I mean, we've had a total of 8 school shootings this year alone. You can't really get much worse than that. So we need to have legitimate discourse and dialogue about how to move forward, and we need to stop blaming everybody, because I truly feel like this is a clear attempt to divide us along political lines. And people say, well, how is it getting political? Well, first of all, if you've been paying attention to the news, you know damn well how it's getting political. But because whenever a school shooting like this happens, the first conversation is had is gun control, pro-guns. It's like if you're for gun control, then you're clearly anti-Second Amendment, which is not the case. I think that the point of the Second Amendment was to allow control, not only of the U.S. citizens over their own dominion, but to make sure that we can keep the U.S. government in check. Now, we all know that the U.S. government at this point has a lot more firepower than any individual U.S. citizen. And we can argue about that all day, whether that should be allowed or not. But I think that when the Second Amendment was written, it was to ensure that the U.S. citizens, like I said, had control over their own autonomy, their property, not only from each other, but from the American government. So to pretend as if gun control is inherently anti-gun, I think is just ludicrous. It's not a fair way of weighing out like the necessities of gun control or what that could end up leading to. I don't think that if we start having the conversation about gun control, does that mean that we just don't have guns anymore? I don't think that's what that means. I think what gun control means is making sure that the people who are mentally ill can't get the guns, making sure that people at the very bare minimum don't exploit loopholes to get those guns to whoever they need to. I think that people, like I said, misconstrue what gun control is as nobody, not even the good guys, have guns. I think that it's the total opposite. And I would say that most progressives agree, which it's we want to make sure that you get what you are claiming you want, which is good guys and women having guns, but only them, and in a very limited fashion, in a way that could protect you or your family, but ensure that if you ever went off the deep end, that you couldn't go and murder 17, 18, 22, depending on what scenario. It seems to be getting worse and worse. But we don't want you to we don't want you to be able to massively murder anybody on a large scale. And once again, on the other side of that fence, I think that most pro Second Amendment people would agree that that's what they want. But the conversation a lot of the time devolves into this left versus right, no guns versus pro guns, when either side is an extremist solution, and extremism never ever works. It's never ever worked in no scenario. I don't care what it is, whether it be veganism, whether it be all out nuclear war, whether it be drink no milk, whether it be drink whole milk and only whole milk. Like, it's just never, no matter what you're trying to figure out, no matter what problem you're trying to find a solution for, extremism just simply is never the answer, people. I don't know how to be any more clear than that. But what we need to be cognizant of is when there are clear attempts to divide us. Because if you get the conversation down to anti-gun versus pro-gun, oftentimes it, once again, like I said, devolves into the left versus the right, when most of us all want the same conclusion. We all want the same outcome, which is we want to be able to send our kids to school and feel safe. We want to be able to go to a movie theater and just know that we're going to be able to enjoy the movie, and that's it. One of my fears is like that this evening during this would be, you might be hearing this the next day, but if you're listening on AFR, you're listening to this right now. And one of my fears is that there's going to be a shooting during the Black Panther release. That's one of my biggest fears. Because we don't deal with these mental health issues, because we don't address racism substantively, and we don't say what racism translates into eventually. Like, racism is conducive to terrorism, terrorist attacks. It's conducive to complacency that allows terrorist attacks like the one that happened in South Carolina to take place. Like the terrorist attack that happened here in Broward County, right down the street from my house. Those attacks are preventable once we address the issues, but it seems like even the left does an okay job of talking about the mental health issue, but the right and the left, by and large, totally get the gun argument wrong. It's not no guns. It's not everybody has guns and everybody can get whatever gun they want. It's somewhere in the middle. And once again, if you try to make that conversation one way or the other, like your way or the highway, we're never going to get a solution. And that's exactly what they want. It's the same thing. The gun conversation is the same thing as the abortion conversation, is the same thing as the immigration conversation, right? It's not let everybody in without checking them. It's not let everybody get abortions when they want to. Same thing. It's not let everybody have whatever gun they want to when they want to use it and how they want to use it. The answer lies somewhere in the middle. First, let's talk about mental health. There's a reason they don't want to talk about mental health, because then guess what? If you talk about mental health, you have to get into the conversation of healthcare in this country and who does and does not have access to it. If you talk about that, all of a sudden the conversation about single payer sounds a lot more enticing to many Republicans and Democrats, who otherwise are being told by their donors not to even discuss the possibility or probability that single payer may or may not ever happen. That's a conversation I wanted to avoid, because that is a huge conversation to discuss right before 2018 midterm elections, people. You all know that Donald Trump actually said less than a month ago that the only way this country will be unified is if a major event happens. I'm here to let you all know that I said that's not good, because it's these type of events that the government has always used to make us forget who is our enemy and who is our friend and who we are fighting against. And I assure you that we're fighting the same enemy. We're supposed to be fighting the same enemy anyway. That enemy is the elites. That enemy seems to be the establishment, government, the elites, and the oligarchs. No matter what country they claim. George Soros isn't even an American citizen, and yet he invests more money in the United States than anybody I've ever seen. In the political world, I mean. The only one comes close to it is the Koch brothers. But the way that the Soros does it is way worse. He buys group after group after group, invests hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. I mean, and he undermines the United States government that he's not even a part of. He undermines the United States elections that he's never even ran in. So we need to be careful about just irrationally reacting. And why I say this is there are two reasons why I say this. One, it's been reported that there are multiple shooters, not just one now. Now, this obviously is contrary to what a lot of people the reports that a lot of people initially saw. But no, according to a senior at Stoneman Douglas High School, which is the shooting, or where the shooting took place, Alexa Miegnick, who was a senior, said that she had talked to Nicholas right after the shots had gone off, and that he didn't look necessarily startled or alerted or even like on the defensive initially. But she said, "Oh, I thought it was you," like jokingly, because at this point they didn't know that anybody had been injured. But she said, "I thought it was you," just very jokingly, like, "Oh, because she used to be a little trouble in middle school. So whenever this happened, I was like, oh, it might be Nicholas." And she said that there were multiple shooters. She said because she had seen him literally right after a couple of shots had went off. Now, understand that in situations like this, which we've seen time and time again, the shooter usually kills themselves. However, this was not the case. Weirdly enough, I feel like this Nicholas character isn't stupid. I don't feel like he's the smartest, but I don't feel like he isn't stupid. I think he knows what this means if he is pinned with 17 deaths. I think he understands what that means. Do I believe that he killed 17 people by himself without anybody apprehending him? I don't think so. I don't think so at all. I think that when Alexa said that there were for sure multiple shooters, I would say that this is pretty consistent with every major mass shooting that we've seen that's been extremely controversial. We've heard this about Orlando. We've heard this about the Las Vegas shooting. We've heard this about this shooting and others as well. Multiple shooters that gets reported but never picked up by the mainstream media. It stays local usually. Now, why is this a big deal? Because it's also another pattern that's been established. Apparently on YouTube, Nicholas actually wrote a comment saying that he's going to be a professional school shooter, and the YouTuber actually reported that. And they didn't do anything about it. They said they couldn't find him because he went under a pseudonym. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the FBI could not find somebody who went under a fucking YouTube pseudonym. Come on, people. It's interesting because they said the same thing about the Orlando shooter. He was in the database. It's the same thing that they said about the Vegas shooter. He was in the database. And it seems to be a pretty consistent and established pattern. What's the point of when you see something and then you say something and then absolutely nothing is done? It's almost as if they are waiting for something to be done as potentially, something that could galvanize people, not necessarily in a good way. I'm not saying whether this is certain or, or not, but what I am saying is it looks a little suspicious. I mean, there are people who are saying they've been brainwashed. There are people who feel like they don't remember doing it. That there was one person said they tried to turn themselves in. I think it was Hassan, something or another. But that he tried to turn himself in because he knew he was dangerous. He was mentally unstable, and he still was able to shoot people. So, because they wouldn't take him. This is somebody who tried to turn himself in. Say he was being controlled. His mind was being controlled. Of course, you all know this isn't the first time that we've heard claims such as this. Like, this isn't the first time that we heard that, mind control is being used by the military. I mean, if you can hypnotize somebody with a damn pocket watch, which I've seen done, crazy stuff. I've seen some crazy stuff be done. But if you can do that, imagine what if the government wanted someone under their control from afar, what they could do to that person. I don't think that's unreasonable at all. They already control weather to a degree. This isn't disputed. This is a fact. I mean, it could be disputed, but they can. When I say control weather, I don't mean pinpoint accuracy. That's not what I mean. But I do mean that they can invoke certain weather phenomena, and they're not really shy about hiding it. So to pretend like they couldn't do something as simple as at least control someone's mind or make them act irrationally is very easy to believe. So be very, 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 very wary before engaging in that conversation where you want to demonize the other side, or perhaps pretend as if one side is more guilty than the other side when it's not the case. I think there's a lot more that needs to go in to this conversation before we start talking about who's guilty and who's not guilty of what. And so I do want to touch onto another subject. However, there's been a huge debate right now. Well, I wouldn't even call it a debate, but there's been a lot of back and forth, I would say, whether subliminally or otherwise, between Jimmy Dore and TYT. And of course, as you all know, this is over the Russiagate scandal and the perpetuation of a Russiagate scandal that has actually never been proven in the slightest. Jimmy Dore did a very, 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 very good cover of an interview between Adam Schiff and what's his name? I always forget his name. Tucker Carlson. There you go. Tucker Carlson. I'm not good with names. Y'all know that. But Tucker Carlson, and all of his weirdness, did a very, very good job of questioning Adam Schiff on the facts. He said, Adam Schiff, look, man. Okay, maybe we can believe you. Maybe we can believe you. So go ahead and just look that camera straight into go ahead. Let's go ahead and say, we have absolute evidence that Putin did, in fact, hack the election. And all Tucker Carlson could say was, well, we have proof that at some point Putin or the Russian government has engaged in trying to influence. That's not what he asked. That's not what he said. And there's a reason that Tucker Carlson asked that question specifically. The reason why is because we know for a fact that it's bullshit. Right? If it was factual schmactual, it's like I like to say, factual schmactual, actual factual, then for sure, right? For sure, he would have said that and had all the because I mean there are people who I can confidently look. If you put me on CNN right now or any mainstream media, I would look at them and say, I am absolutely positive that Vladimir Putin probably has tried to at some point influence a major election. But as far as whether or not he hacked John Podesta's emails, whether or not he hacked the DNC's emails, whether or not he hacked voter rolls or voting booths during the 2016 presidential election, he was absolutely not guilty of that. I could say that confidently. Or I could say there's absolutely no proof. Not that he's absolutely not guilty, but absolutely no proof. And I can also say confidently that this conversation is only being had not because we're actually the politicians are actually concerned with the outcome of this investigation, but the outcome that this investigation or the realization that our elections may be hacked, but it's not from foreign powers, but from right here at home. That is what they are concerned with. It's nothing to do with Vladimir Putin. They don't fear that he will attack us. Vladimir Putin is trying to figure out how to survive in a world where the empire is the United States of America. Whether you want to say that he's bad or good, I will say this, and this might be going out on a limb here, but I would say that Vladimir Putin is not uniquely worse than any of the last 4 to 5 presidents of the United States of America. Vladimir Putin may have his issues, but I'm sure he didn't bomb 7 countries like the United States did. Vladimir Putin may have his issues, and he may be homophobic as they claim. But I assure you, once again, this is non-unique because we've had homophobic presidents pretty much always until very, very, nope. This probably might be the most homophobic one. So, but yeah. Now, granted, because of the way our democracy works, and we know we have a lot more checks and balances, they have to play ball when it's time to play ball on the left. But homophobia is kind of like a rampant thing in the United States. It didn't just originate in Russia. Vladimir Putin, I'm absolutely positive, has his issues. That doesn't make him worse to any degree than the United States presidents or congresspeople or leaders, secretary of defense, anything. I can say confidently that Vladimir Putin is not worse than Netanyahu. Netanyahu right now, every single day, is trying to obliterate an entire race, trying to obliterate an entire ethnicity, an entire country in Palestine. I can say that Vladimir Putin is not and would not have been worse than Hillary Clinton. I can say that pretty confidently. We have so many things that we need to be worrying about in our American political system that it seems trivial almost to try and address whether or not Putin tried to influence our election. And like I said, Russia at some point probably did try to influence our election for their own good. But it doesn't seem like they would have tried to influence it. Given everything we know, which would take way too long for me to go into right now, but given everything we know, I seriously doubt that Russia would have tried to influence our elections in a way that would pretty much mean that they wouldn't get their uranium and that they would be held accountable. Not saying that Trump is going to hold them accountable, because I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that's going to happen, but I do want to just once again make everybody kind of realize that it's a ploy to make people actually think that it's not our system, it's the Russians. It's not our system, it's just the Russians. It's not our system, it's Putin. It's not our system, it's so and so. They even CNN released an article the other day saying new proof in Russian meddling. It wasn't any type of proof, people. The article was saying the intelligence community, how valuable and reliable they've been as of late. So reliable, right? It said that they think that they're going to use social media to influence the midterm elections. You know what? Maybe. Right? So if you don't like Vladimir Putin, is your tweets saying that you don't like him, could those be seen as an international ploy by the United States to perhaps influence the Russia elections? Well, if you're the United States government, and yeah, I guess so. If you're United States intelligence, I guess so. According to their rules. I'm not saying that, once again, that Russia was not in any way trying to influence our elections. I'm not saying that. But let's put it in context, people. The United States uses Machiavellian tactics. And once again, I'm going to go into how another case of that has reared its ugly head. But they use Machiavellian tactics. If you've ever read The Prince, you would know that one of the main things that Machiavelli tells the prince is to accuse others of what you are guilty of. Now, as far as the social media bots are concerned in the United States, really during the entirety of the election until the very end, there was only one person associated with using bots to spread fake news, until it was then turned around and made to seem as if Russia and Bernie Sanders supporters were doing this. And that was David Brock of Media Matters. He was using bots. He was spreading fake news. And of course, it's not hard to make a bunch of bots look like they're from Russia. It wouldn't be difficult at all. Google was also assisting David Brock and Hillary Clinton. So would it really be just totally unfeasible to believe that this is once again a Machiavellian tactic of blame others of what you are already guilty of, blame others of what you are about to do? It's very realistic to believe that. But once again, they're selling this as truth, as proof and truth, without any type of, we can't just go with the intelligence community thing again. We can't keep doing that. If we keep doing that, then we're a little bit slower than I originally thought, people, because we've been duped by that claim before. We've been duped by that claim before. And if you don't, I don't know if you're a new listener, the whole 17 intelligence community, 17 intelligence agency thing was put to kaput because the article got retracted, and they said that actually was not true. There's been a bunch of articles that have been retracted regarding that story because it came from the New York Times, and Seymour Hersh does a good job of breaking it down in a recording where he was speaking candidly of the New York Times, speaking candidly about John Brennan, the former CIA director who was in charge of a disinformation campaign. He said that the New York Times has always had a bad habit of accepting stories whenever they hear them and appealing and broadly to just blindly to authority, especially in the intelligence community. So even if it's not true, they've had to retract a bunch of articles in the past before my time, where this was the case. So we know that we can't just blindly trust the intelligence community. And yet they're once again trying to kind of use the intelligence community, despite everything we found out about the FBI in the last couple of weeks, as the authority, without proof, without facts, without paperwork, I have to see a paper trail for me to believe something that's been, that is the official narrative at this point of the intelligence community. I think that's pretty reasonable, right? Given everything we know. It's understandable why Jimmy Dore would want to it's heroic, in my opinion. Understand that any day of the week, Jimmy Dore uses the TYT Network not as just a platform from time to time, but if he ever got into a legal dispute because of YouTube content, the network would provide him with attorneys and would fight his battles for him. If he ever got into a monetization dispute, a copyright dispute, any type of dispute like that, they promote him. His shows end up on the front page more often than others because he has that ability. And because he belongs to that network. So when I tell you that him going on and pretty much calling out TYT in every way you can think of, and he did everything but said TYT's name directly. He said that there's only a few big networks on the left that are not spewing the rhetoric. He said himself, Kyle Kulinski from Secular Talk, Tim Black, who else? He said a couple of more, but moral of the story is He went out of his way to not name TYT. And before this, it was Kyle Kalinske who had a debate with Cenk and just totally, it was over the Russiagate scandal, and totally shreds this guy. I mean, puts him through the ringer, and not with didn't get all overhyped about it, and he didn't sensationalize it, and then you know how Cenk does, or how other people do. Kyle was totally fact based and very logical and reasonable. He was like, I'm not saying that Putin should never be held accountable in certain scenarios. It has nothing to do with that. It doesn't make him pro Putin simply because he realizes and recognizes why the Russiagate narrative is being pushed. Because in order for you to understand whether or not something is holistically true or holistically false, you have to understand why, the intention behind the story, or the intention behind the narrative, especially if you've ever paid attention to the U.S. politics. If we don't ask those questions, then we will be led to pursue an agenda that is not necessarily the best for this country or the people who reside in it. If you blindly just believe things, that blind faith will be used against you, like we see it right now. Remember with the Assad regime, the Syria situation that happened, not even 6 months ago, maybe 7 at the most. Around, I want to say March, maybe late February, where there were supposedly chemical weapons used in Syria by the Assad regime. And the first thing we did is just let off rounds, right? Boom. Hit an air base after we evacuated them. And then what happened next? Well, I'll tell you what happened next. One, the United Nations all agree, what the hell, we should have conducted an investigation. And we led them to believe that we were going to conduct an investigation. And in the middle of the night, we changed our mind pretty quickly. We changed our mind very, very quickly. And what I mean by that is we just let off a barrage of rockets on a military base. Later on, as in very, very recently, Mattis says that there has been absolutely no proof, no evidence whatsoever of chemical weapons being used against his people. Now, weirdly enough, he also says there's been absolutely no evidence of any chemical weapons being used. And then that actually is going to bring me to my third story. But we will talk about that a little bit more. But I want to say that, like I said, it's pretty obvious, right? The Russian story is just, it's not exactly what it's being portrayed as. And the fact that TYT, the network, not Jimmy or Kyle Kalinske, I gained a lot of respect for Kyle after watching him debate Cenk. A lot of respect for him. I urge you all to go check out that debate as well. I do a good job. I do a cover it on my YouTube channel. I do an analysis of it from start to finish. So check that out if you want to watch it there. But the TYT Network pushing this narrative is dangerous, and the fact that Kyle Kalinske and Jimmy Dore, who is going all out to fight against that narrative, is important. I don't think that Jimmy Dore should leave. Some people think that, but I don't. I don't think that we should leave a network with that much power and that much clout in the progressive world, on the internet, in the independent media world. I don't think we should leave them with that amount of unchecked power. Same reason I say that, there's no way I would say that we should completely and totally dim exit a party. I would say that it's situational. Maybe in California, you can't dim exit because the Democratic Party in California has way, way, way too many Democrats that can control the outcome of California politics. But in a place like Michigan, dim exiting would be perfect because they don't have that many people in the Democratic Party as is, and they need all the help they can get. So the moral of the story is you don't want to leave a party which is the second largest party, whether you want to say fundraising wise, influence wise. They are the second largest party, unfortunately, and that goes for the Republican Party as well. We can't leave them totally unchecked. So when we need reform across the board. And so when I say we need reform of the TYT network, part of that reform is having someone like Jimmy Dore there to say, hey, Cenk, shut the fuck up. You're full of shit. Having someone like Kyle Kalinske stand up and say, hey, Cenk, shut the fuck up. You're full of shit. Right? It's important to have that. Otherwise, you're left in a situation where, you're left in a situation where nobody, where Cenk gets to do what he wants to, when he wants to, totally unchecked. Totally unchecked. The next thing I want to discuss with you all has to do with the Syria situation. Oh man, it has been so much, right? It's been so much regarding the Syria situation. First of all, the fact that Israel attacked Syria, claiming that it was because there was a drone that flew over Israel. There was no picture of the drone. There was a picture of the plane that Syria shot down, which of course was Israeli. There was no picture of the quote-unquote drone that was being used until later on when people kept saying that there was no picture. You know, the only picture that was found, it was a picture of an American stealth drone. Now, the Israeli Times tried to claim it was a poor copy. You know, a poor attempt to mimic that stealth drone. But I would beg to differ. I would think that it would be pretty difficult for Iran to get their hands on Iran specifically, not any other Middle Eastern country, but someone like Iran. It would be pretty difficult for them to get a working drone straight from the United States. I would even argue that Israel planted that drone, so it make it look like there was some type of military exercise, because you just let off the biggest rocket bombing. Like you just let off the most bombs in Syrian territory since 1982. All of a sudden, it's all over the news, mind you. Syria has been being bombed consistently by Israel for about 8 years. But this is the one that makes the news. Right after Mattis says that there is no evidence of any Syrian chemical weapons being used in Syria by the Syrian government, by Assad or his regime. But he did say this. He said there is no evidence, however, but we will find evidence. We are going to look for evidence, which gives him really, he's giving himself a mandate to stay in Syria for as long as they want to. Now, we constantly claimed that we were in Syria because Assad was using chemical weapons. We constantly claimed that we were in Syria because Assad was housing ISIS, or ISIS was using Assad and was using people as shields, and then, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it seems not to be the case, because we just said, once again, there was no chemical weapons. Oh, yeah, and by the way, Russia supposedly has defeated ISIS, and they are not capable militarily in the Syrian region anymore. But I want to say this. Why are we going to be there? What need is it for us to have a base there indefinitely, or a presence there indefinitely? Well, they say the United States said it was about making sure Iran doesn't get more powerful so they don't threaten Israel. However, Iran was not attacked by Israel. Well, they've just started pretty much perpetual warfare, but the day that article came out, there was no attack on Iran, even though they said it was an Iranian drone. Now, I understand that Syria and Iran tend to work together for their own protection. But let's be clear, as Bibi claims to be the victim, there was no attack from Syria on Israel, and yet they bombed the hell out of Syria. And it makes you also wonder, why exactly were we using chemical weapons as the rationale behind going into Syria? Right? Why do we use that excuse? Well, like I said in the beginning, people, as I've said time and time again, Machiavelli. If you haven't read that book, read it. You'll learn a lot about how the United States operates if you read that book. Because the United States admitted to using radioactive munitions in Syria. This is as early as February 18th, 2017. That's when this article came out. February 18th, 2017. And mind you, people, this is around the time that the U.S. was already in Syria about dealing with the chemical weapons. So, despite vowing not to use depleted uranium weapons in its military action in Syria, the U.S. government has now admitted that it has fired thousands of deadly rounds into Syrian territory, as Foreign Policy magazine reports. Quote, U.S. Central Command spokesperson Major Josh Jacques told Air Wars and Foreign Policy that 5,265 armor-piercing 30mm rounds containing depleted uranium were shot from Air Force A-10 fixed-wing aircraft on November the 16th and November the 22nd, 2015, destroying about 350 vehicles in the country's eastern desert. Operation Inherent Resolve spokesperson John Moore said in 2015 that the U.S. and coalition aircraft have not and will not be using depleted uranium munitions in Iraq or Syria during Operation Inherent Resolve. Now we know that is clearly not true, right? Numerous studies have found that depleted uranium is particularly harmful when the dust is inhaled by the victim. A University of Southern Maine study discovered that depleted uranium damages DNA in the human lungs. The team, led by John Pierce Wise, exposed cultures of the cells to uranium compound at different concentrations. The compounds cause breaks in the chromosomes within the cells, stop them from growing and dividing healthily. These data suggest that exposure to particular DU, or depleted uranium, may pose a significant DNA damage risk and could possibly result in lung cancer. The team wrote in the Chemical Research Journal in Toxicology. So, we accuse Syria of using chemical weapons. We found out there's no evidence that they've done so. And yet here we are, using weapons that would give people lung cancer. What in the 5,000 rounds, people. 5,265 armor-piercing 35mm rounds of depleted uranium. You know, the nuclear stuff. What in the actual... Come on. So, what we are learning, once again, what we are learning is that the United States, as usual, is accusing someone else of doing something that we had already been guilty of. So while we were there, I mean, you know how it goes, right? We love. Before we do something, we have to take the eye off of us. Or even after we've done something. Just like with Hillary Clinton in the Russiagate scandal. Right? Or in John Podesta and the DNC and Debbie Wasserman Schultz and Donna Brazile. Didn't y'all do all this stuff in these emails? Yeah, but hey, Russia shouldn't have been the one to tell y'all that we did it. Y'all should have found out in some other way. But Russia didn't tell us. This is actually clearly Julian Assange who said that y'all did. Yeah, but no. Nah, it was Russia. If you read those emails, it is illegal for you to do so because Russia hacked them. But it's Julian Assange who did it. He didn't hack anything. He laid out pretty clearly how he received them, or the process that they go through to receive those types of emails. We, at this point, it should be pretty clear for us to see that the tactics used by the American government, political parties, etc., it's literally accuse the other side of what you're guilty of. And this isn't just, once again, I don't want people to think this is just the Democratic Party or even the American government or the Obama administration who's guilty of this. Republicans have done this as well. They say you tax and spend, tax and spend. The Democrats are not from the middle class, and that the Democrats cut and dry just want higher taxes on everybody, and the Republicans cut and dry just want lower taxes on everybody. That is not the fucking case. They are just as guilty as taxing and spending, if sometimes, and depending on the year, more so than the Democrats are at large. But if they accuse the Democrats of doing so, they've told you that their platform is fiscal conservatism, so they're like, oh, they couldn't possibly be doing the same things that they accuse the Democrats of doing. If you look at what George W. Bush did, he taxed the hell out of y'all. And then in Republican states, well, I would say North Carolina specifically, because I could speak on that. I've done taxes there. Whereas I used to get, I would get about $100 to $120 taken out of a paycheck just for North Carolina. I would get back $400 to $500 back on my tax returns from North Carolina. Pretty good amount. Once Republicans took over, that number sharply dropped to the point where I would only get back $25 to $30, but I was still getting the same amount of taxes taken out. In one scenario, I ended up owing money back to North Carolina. Not a joke. So don't believe that the psyops and the tactics, the Machiavellian tactics, are used only on one side of the aisle or the other. They are used across the board, people. Seriously. Understand that if we allow this war in Syria to progress, it will end just like the war in Libya with Gaddafi. He said that he would step down. That did him little to no good. Still assassinated. Even after he said he would step down to keep the West out of Africa. When he made that decision, he was the elected, dutifully elected, and duly elected African Union chairperson who had the respect of his peers and other politicians. Now, if you want to make the argument that Gaddafi wasn't a saint, once again, I would make the argument that you're probably absolutely right. Gaddafi was in the middle of fighting the most dangerous empire in this world, which is the empire of the United States of America. In the same way that I believe that Fidel Castro wasn't a saint, but you cannot be a saint in the middle of a revolution. But I do know this: Fidel Castro, as well as Gaddafi, absolutely refused to have people worship the ground they walk on. Fidel Castro absolutely refused to have any type of statues, any type of any memorabilia that made him seem omnipotent, that made him seem like a deity, like a god. He refused to allow that to happen. And to this day, you can go to Cuba and there's absolutely no statues of Fidel Castro. Not like Stalin or Lenin. So if we're going to see the same thing happen in Syria, we're going to see it if we don't speak up and grow awareness. We need to change the energy. We need to change the narrative. And we can only do that by spreading awareness, educating people to see these patterns, these clearly established patterns, clear established patterns that have pursued and persisted about 30 years now. We first entered Libya about 30 years ago. And have been consistently dethroning and killing anyone who disagrees with us. That's not even talking about what we did in Chad. It's not talking about what we did in Somalia. It's not talking about what we did in Sudan. That's just Libya we entered 30 years ago. We need a change. And that change is only going to come if we fight for it, people. Before we can fight, people have to know, right? Before we can fight, people have to know what exactly we are fighting for and what exactly we are fighting against. We're not fighting each other. You're fighting the elite. At least you should be. You should be fighting the elite. All right, you should be. Not all of you are, but you should be. I am not your enemy, nor are you mine. And I hope that you all remember that as we go into these very, very difficult days that are coming ahead, discussing gun control, discussing the war in Syria, discussing Israel and Bibi Netanyahu. I hope that we all remember that we are on the same team. It is the elites, the establishment, that are trying to divide us. It is the elite and the establishment who are trying to convince us that we are not on the same team. And I know for a fact that we are, people. And I think deep down a lot of you know that as well. I did a video the other day talking about this. I don't care. The racism, all the racism, discrimination, anti-this, anti-that. We are taught to be scared and fearful of things that we are not accustomed to. It's called xenophobia, the fear of anything strange. But I am not your enemy. I don't care. If you want to be racist, hey, that's on you. But you're going to have to tell your if you're talking trash about black people, you got to say, well, look, I mean, there's one guy, because I'm going to love you regardless. You can tell me you got that one black friend. I'm going to love you regardless, people. I've seen love and compassion change lives, people. Change lives. Love and compassion is what we need. Love and compassion will change the narrative. The fear of scarcity, the fear that is induced by the idea, the false idea of scarcity, is what leads us to a lot of the conclusions that we have, which is that it's us versus them. We all have the same solution, or excuse me, you all want the same conclusions. We just have different solutions, but different solutions does not make you the enemy. Different solutions just means we have different backgrounds. And it's probably a mixture of both of our solutions. That's probably what it will take in the long run. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all so much for tuning in, and always, always remember, find your balance. Peace.